Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. I'm Laura Backus, and we're really happy you're all here with us tonight. We have a really interesting guest. I'm excited about this particular conversation. If you are new to us and you want to get on our list and find out everything we are doing beyond the Kidlit Distancing Social, but including our upcoming guests, you can go to writeforkids.org/ultimate cheat sheet, get on our list, and you get a free ebook. We've been in business for 31 years now, and we've compiled all of our best beginner children's writing knowledge into a free ebook. And that's yours for free for getting on our list. And if you are interested in subscribing to our newsletter, Children's Book Insider, which is our flagship product in its 31st year of publication, you can go to writeforkids.org/CBI, $5 a month, delivered to your inbox every month, about 20 pages, market information, lots of articles on writing, business part of publishing, interviews with authors, editors, agents, and illustrators, and a special above the slush pile code every month from either an agent or an editor, so you can submit to them and jump over the slush pile. Plus access to our children's writing knowledge base on the CBI Clubhouse membership site. $5 a month, writeforkids.org/CBI. So now we get to celebrate your accomplishments. I've got some great ones today. Rhonda Brown writes, after about 10 years of walking around with a picture book in my head, I finally got it on paper, edited and illustrated, and I've self-published it on Amazon. What's behind that door? This picture book journey has been my weekend hobby for the past several years. I began working with an illustrator, and about 2/3 of the way through, Hurricane Harvey hit, and my illustrator lost everything. So we began again about a year later. It became a cathartic project for both of us. Congratulations, Rhonda. It's a really cool concept for a picture book. I went on Amazon and looked at it. And I'm so glad you stuck with it all these years, and you and your illustrator have something to be proud of. So congratulations. Brandy Ann Yamura writes, I'd love to share that after 8 years of working on children's fiction, I finally got an agent. I'm represented by Trisha Lawrence at Aaron Murphy Literary. Congrats, Brandy Ann. Good luck with the submissions, and you will let us know when you have a publishing deal, I'm sure. So good luck on that. And our friend Beth Stillborn, I especially appreciate this little celebration. She wrote, as I sit here listening to May 25th's Kidlit Distancing Social with Shannon Anderson yet again, I wanted to say thank you, and thank you to Shannon, for this fabulous conversation. It turned into a Shannon Anderson week for me. I was so inspired by the social that when Shannon posted on Facebook on Friday that she was featured in a podcast interview, I listened to it immediately. Then I completed her mini course on Mindset for Makers. Saturday, I made my Ikigai. Oh God, I can't remember how to pronounce that. Ikigai, I think. Board. I know I'm saying that wrong. And created my own today's to-do list template inspired by hers. I really needed this at this juncture of my life. So I say a fervent thank you. Thank you, Beth, for that feedback. And I'm sure Shannon is thrilled to hear that as well. And if you all have no idea what Beth's talking about because you missed Shannon's appearance 2 weeks ago on the Kidlit Distancing Social, you could go to either writeforkids.org, which is our main website, and click on Kidlit Distancing Socials right along the top. Or you could go to this bit.ly link, bit.ly/Kidlit Social Replays. You'll see the replays for all of the socials, and you can watch Shannon's, which she has a lot of really great tricks and things to stay motivated, to stay focused, and that's what Beth is talking about there. And I would say watch all of the replays because I have never had a bad guest. So thank you, Beth, for sharing that with us. I'm glad it was so Ikigai, that's right. Thank you, Dory. Um, that's how you say that word. So, but thank you, Beth, for that feedback. That's wonderful. So I want to hear your good news. Email me at mail@rightforkids.org and put celebrate in the subject line, and we will feature your news on a future Kidlit Distancing Social. No celebration is too small. Here's a link of interest this week. Don't Start a Seed Without These Four Essential Elements by Nathan Bransford on his blog, nathanbransford.com, and this discusses how a scene must reveal the protagonist's mindset, motivation, plan, and what's at stake. It's a really, really great article. I love the way he broke down kind of the purpose of each scene and what it needs to do in your story. It can't do nothing. Those are the scenes you need to cut. So here's a direct link to that article, bit.ly/4 scene elements. Number 4, scene elements. And we will have all these links under the replay when we send out the replay tomorrow and put it on our blog tomorrow. But that's a great article. And I have something else to share. I mentioned this last week. This new venture I am doing in collaboration with Danny Alcorn at Writing Academy. It's called Writer's Secret Sauce. We are rolling it out next week, but you can go watch a free video right now that explains why you control your writing destiny. And so go to bit.ly/writing-destiny. You can watch that video. You can sign up to get a second video, which is going out on Thursday, which is also very, very cool. And you can also be on the list to come to our unveiling of the Writer's Secret Sauce on the 17th. And we are having an entire lesson from the course that we are going to give away for free that night. And you can watch it live with us. Very, very cool. So hope to see you there. And now I am going to welcome my guest. Aimee Jackson is the owner and editorial director of Bookbridge Press, a company that assists independent children's book authors and helps them take their work from manuscript to an illustrated published book. Aimee has more than 20 years' experience in trade publishing. She was editorial director for Rising Moon Books and Northward Books. Great publishers, by the way. And they're both now imprints owned by Cooper Square. And she was senior editor for Sleeping Bear Press, another wonderful smaller publisher, and acquisitions manager for Free Spirit Publishing. I love all those publishers. She brings her expertise and successful career to Bookbridge Press to give clients a direct perspective on the development of quality books for children. And her experience gives her a unique view on the changing dynamics of book publishing and marketing, and the benefits that now exist for those who choose to publish as independent publishers, independent authors. So let's talk to Aimee. Welcome, Aimee.
Hello. Hi, everybody. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for being here. So this is great. We have never had this topic on the social in doing it over a year now. So I'm really glad that you're here. And I love your experience and your sort of your cred in the industry. So I'm really happy to have you on. Some writers are reluctant to independently publish, which, by the way, for those of you who don't quite understand what that means, it's the new term for self-publishing. We call authors who don't traditionally publish, who don't submit to publishers, but who choose to publish their books themselves, independent. They're independently publishing. But some writers are reluctant to do this because they feel there's a stigma against these books in bookstores, libraries, just sort of among, reviewers, the whole industry. Is that actually the case?
I think that the stigma certainly was there in the very beginning when self-publishing was coming up. But I think that it's less so. And the stigma really is in the publishing industry itself. And so what I like to remind authors is that the publishing industry feels really big when you're inside of it. It feels like the whole world, but it's actually pretty small. And
Hmm.
the majority of people are not in publishing, and those are parents, children, teachers, librarians who just want quality books. And
Hmm.
so they aren't necessarily paying attention to who's publishing what. They're looking for the books themselves. So the stigma exists kind of in the publishing world, but outside of publishing, I don't think that it's really even an issue. Um, and I think the other thing that can help, and I always advise my authors to designate a publisher for their book. So not just having their name on the book, but actually
Hmm.
naming a publisher and putting that on the book, on the spine, on the credits page, on the jacket flap,
Right.
sort of differentiating themselves as an independent publisher, truly, their own little business. So it exists, but it depends on your goal. So if your
Mhm.
goal is to get your book in the hands of children, readers, parents, I don't think that it's something to necessarily let that deter you, I guess I would say.
Right, right. And you're right. The average book buyer or parent or grandparent, teacher buying the book, they're going to be looking at the quality of the book. They're not looking at the spine going, "Oh, who published this?" And as long as the book looks professional and is high quality,
Yes,
they're not going to care
exactly.
if you independently published it. Yeah. Now, you have an editorial background,
Yes.
and so you're able to assess and edit your clients' manuscripts on a level that probably goes far beyond what most companies that work with independent publisher or independent authors actually can do. So, what are a few of the craft related areas that tend to pop up most frequently in the manuscripts that you work on?
Um, I think that for new authors, I find often that I think a lot of authors who are new to children's books think that they have to rhyme their stories,
Mm.
and it's not necessary, and it often doesn't work that well. So I would encourage authors to, even if you love rhyme, just try it in prose, just see what it feels like, just play around with it. So that's one of the things that I often see. The other thing is point of view, and that is really hard. It's just I even will consult other editors, on sometimes about if the point of view is shifting a little bit. So a lot of new authors will write in first person present tense, but most picture books are traditional picture books are told generally in third person past tense.
Hmm.
So it's important to read a lot of picture books and actually pay attention to those little details. How is
Hmm.
the story being told? And pay attention to point of view, making sure that it doesn't shift.
Hmm.
Um, I think another kind of issue would be overwriting, writing too much, telling too much. Um,
Hmm.
and then a big one is just not trusting your editor and not trusting yourself. So I
Hmm.
think those are two really important things that come with experience with writing yourself, working with an editor, trusting that relationship. Um,
Hmm.
so that's another really important aspect.
Sure. Can you tell if someone hasn't read a children's book in 30 or 40 years and then they're trying to write a children's book? Does that come through in the manuscript?
I feel like I can tell people who maybe they're new to writing, but their ear is tuned to picture book. And that
Hmm.
tells me that they read a lot, have read a lot of picture books, read them out loud to their children, or
Hmm.
they might be former teachers or current teachers who read a lot. So it's really important to read as much as you can and get your ear tuned to the pacing of picture book, um, the pacing of a page turn, all of those
Hmm.
aspects. So when I get a story that's sort of didactic and feels like what an adult thinks a child should know,
Hmm.
that often to me tells me that that person may not be paying close enough attention to other picture books that are out there.
Hmm.
So, yeah, I guess I would say to a point.
Right. Yeah. Those are all definite things that you pick up on if you read a lot of sort of
Mhm.
current picture books, and you get that sense that they're not preachy. Maybe in the past they were, but these days that doesn't fly.
Yeah.
And the pacing and much tighter wording, less description, all of those things are very something you learn from reading current picture books for sure. Do you ever turn down a project because it's just too far away from being ready to publish?
I wouldn't turn down a project because it needed too much work, because that's what I do. And I love that kind of challenge, actually. The reason why I would turn down a manuscript is if I don't believe as a book, it will have legs in the
Mhm.
marketplace. If I don't believe that the author can be successful with it for whatever reason, either there are too many
Mhm.
like that, or there just isn't enough, story to it. Um, and to be really honest, I actually am trying to see if the author um, is going to be someone who can sell and promote themselves too, because you need to be able to do those things to be successful with your project. So I'm looking at those two things. Will your story have a long shelf life? Can you sell it? Is there interest for it in the marketplace? And are you someone who can get in front of people, promote yourself, and sell your book? Those are
Mhm.
really important. Those are the two main things that I'm looking for. As far as if a manuscript is just, really in rough shape, that doesn't deter me at all. So,
Mhm.
yeah.
Right. Okay, great. So I was going to ask about commercial appeal next, and how, if you're independently publishing, how wide of an audience do you really need for your book? Is if it's got a niche market, but you know how to market directly to those people, is that okay? Or do you need a commercial project that might sell 50,000
Mhm.
copies, which of course would be awesome, but sort of realistically, as an independent publisher, how big an audience do you need?
Well, it's an interesting question because there's advantages to both, but
Mm-hmm.
I think that independent publishing was made for kind of the niche author, because
Mm-hmm.
um, sometimes having something that's really specific, niche specific like that, gives you a way to zero in on a target market.
Mm-hmm.
And, or even if that means being local to your state or something like that, and
Sure.
local to your community, and people who would get excited about a book about whatever is important to your state or your community. Um, Independent authors can really zero in on that market because they have the ability to sell in all kinds of different ways that a traditional publisher isn't interested in,
Mm-hmm.
farmers markets and, festivals and things like that. Um, if you have a general book that would appeal to a wide audience, that gives you some advantages. If you're someone who, um, likes to the school environment, getting in front of kids, marketing yourself to schools as a visiting author, um, so I think it depends on what your style is. Knowing what your style is can help you have success in either regard. Um,
Mm-hmm.
but I think if an author can sell 1,000 copies, let's say within a year's time, that's successful for an independent author. And if you start thinking about, can you sell 1,000 books? You probably can, really.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it comes down to a lot to how are you going to sell, who are you going to sell to,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
but there are advantages to both. And again, I think independent publishing is perfect for books that are too niche for a large house.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Well, and that's often why some manuscripts get rejected by larger houses because they
exactly,
just don't have a big enough commercial audience for
exactly.
that publisher. Now, some authors turn to self publishing because they have been rejected many times. Is that a mistake? Or is it more important to figure out why you were rejected and see if, as an independent author, you can, overcome those areas, improve on those areas and make the book a success?
I don't think it's a mistake at all. And because I've worked in the majority of my career was in traditional publishing and I was an acquiring editor everywhere that I worked, I know what goes into those decisions, why books get rejected. And it's for so many reasons that have nothing to do with necessarily the quality of the book.
Sure.
Um, Publishers can only really take a small amount of new books from new authors that they don't have an established relationship with. So
Hmm.
it's a really tough market. Um, so I think that publishing independently is a great opportunity if you're not getting your book placed.
Hmm.
And one of the things to keep in mind too is that some of my authors who are the most successful publish both ways. They continue to publish with traditional houses, they publish independently for various reasons. They might have a book that's too niche specific, like you said, or something that's just a really like a pet project that they want to have a lot of involvement in.
Hmm.
Um, because when you're publishing independently, you're involved in every step of the process. Um, so I think that it's not either or, it's they're not instead of, they're next to each other, it's
Right.
not, so you can do both,
Hmm.
and independent publishing is just another way to publish. That's how I see it. There are multiple ways and that's another way.
Sure, sure. Now, an advantage of using a company like yours is that you also help with the design and the illustration of the book. And especially if you are independently publishing a picture book, that is a huge job. And a lot of authors don't realize how important the illustrations are and how, if you have no designer illustration experience yourself, even knowing what to look for in an illustrator is hard, you know. So having someone with expertise is really important. Um, do you find that a lot of authors don't understand sort of the how important the illustrations are? Do you actually advise them on sort of the style of the illustration that works best for their book, or any or that sort of thing?
This is one of my favorite parts of the process, and it's our specialty. We produce very visually driven books, and um, all of the people who work for Bookbridge are art directors or designers, me, print manager, other editors. We all come from children's publishing. All of us come from children's trade publishing. We all have very deep roots in that industry, and so we know how to build books that way, in the traditional way. And finding illustrators is, it's kind of a nuanced thing. The way that we work with authors is we first ask for their vision. I ask them to point me to books that have an art style that speaks to them.
Hmm.
And so I look at all of that, and then we go and look at illustrators that we know. We go and look at art reps and their portfolios and look at all of those illustrators. And we, find several illustrators that kind of fit within that style. And then we put those in front of the author, and then together we kind of narrow it down and narrow it down. The art director has, is a part of that discussion too, and a really important part of that discussion.
Mhm.
And I really trust the art directors, their vision, as well. So it's incredibly important. The artwork, a perfect picture book is a perfect marriage between text and illustration. So
Mhm.
they're working together, but they also are working independently. So there's a visual story going on. There's, the text story. They work together, but they also kind of are doing their own thing as well. I mean, illustration, you don't want it to literally illustrate the words because that's
Right.
kind of boring. Um, and then the design is so important. The design is part of the art, it's part of the package. And designers know that white space means something, page turn means something, where the text falls on the page, it means something. It's all part of, a picture book is a piece of art. And, so you want to have all those elements working together so that it's just this very kind of lush experience for a child to just like fall inside of this world. And so all of it matters. Every bit of it matters. All of those loving hands create the most beautiful books. And
Mhm.
so I wouldn't produce a book without an art director and a designer. I just wouldn't do it.
Sure. And you do more than picture books, right? You also do chapter books and novels, that sort of thing. So you have designers that you work with, I assume even for non-illustrated books?
So all of our books do have illustration elements. So our chapter books have, most of them have black and white line art in them, and not necessarily a lot. It could even be just 4 or 5 images. Um, but because they're for younger, they're chapter books rather than YA.
Mhm.
Um, so they do have some illustrated elements in them. Certainly the cover art is really important. And then we also do board books, baby and toddler books too. And obviously in those cases, you might have one word on a page. So the artwork is crucial there, and how it's laid out is crucial too.
Mhm.
But even the chapter books are that we produce are really beautiful. You know, and again, it's so important, just at the top of every chapter, what's visually happening on that page? How are you treating like the chapter number? Is there a little illustrative element? And chapter books are actually kind of hard because it's running text, it's flowing text. And
Mhm.
so there's a lot of work that kind of goes into those being really beautiful, but and really accessible, because these are younger readers, they're new to chapter books, and so you want the text to be accessible to those readers who might be a little bit reluctant as
Mhm.
readers, but who are interest wise, who are at that level now.
Mhm. Okay, great. So if an author were to work with you, how much of the process are you with them? You've got the editorial, obviously, design, illustration. What happens after that? Do you advise them on where to get their books printed, for example? Do you advise them on how to try find distribution, or how much do you do after the book is actually created?
So we do everything from editorial development, story development, through illustration design. We do all of the print management as well. So we oversee the printing and making sure, because that's part of the quality of the package. It's really
Mhm.
important to us as well. So we spend a lot of time with that, and with the printers we work with. Um, and we do generally traditional offset printing. Some authors want to go to a print on demand option, and for certain books, that's okay if they're going to maybe not be able to sell as many, or they just can't handle having like the stock or anything.
Mhm.
For the most part, we print at traditional printers, traditionally offset. Um, and then after that, our focus is on the production of the book, and we're kind of a small boutique style production house, so we don't directly do distribution, sales, or marketing, but we do create marketing collateral for the authors, postcards, bookmarks, sell sheets, those kinds of things, press releases. And then we refer to certain distribution channels, certain distributors. Um,
Mhm.
if authors want to have their books stored at a warehouse in a fulfillment center, we work with them on that. So we match people to things
Okay.
that they need. If someone is really new and not sure what to do, we'll match them with an author coach.
Okay.
So those things are a little bit outside of us,
Mhm.
but we never leave anyone just, we never just like toss them out into the
Right.
wild. Yeah. So
Well, that's great. At least if you can point them in the right direction,
right.
that's very, very helpful. Yeah. So, marketing, obviously, once books are done, it's essential to help your book find their readers.
Absolutely.
Have
Mhm.
any of your authors done a particularly great job of marketing that you've noticed, or have done something really interesting or sort of out of the box that you want to share with us?
Yeah, I have some authors who are incredibly successful, and I think um, some of the things they share is that a lot of my authors are former teachers,
Mhm.
and so they're really comfortable with kids and getting in front of them. And I think authors who have a lot of success are getting into the schools, getting into the classrooms, and not just going to read their book, but they're creating a program around their book, something around the subject matter. And they create a program where they can go in for half a day or a day and work with the kids on writing their own stories or doing artwork, or if the book has a particular topic, um, and working with them on that. So I think authors who are really comfortable getting into the schools and create a program around it have a lot of success.
Mhm.
Um, and just authors who work really hard at it, who are, it's, they're always working it. They're working really hard. They're promoting themselves. Um,
Mhm.
so I think that's one of the ways I've seen a lot of success is
Mhm.
when they're getting into the schools, I think.
Right.
Yeah.
And I think it's important that for each author they find the style of marketing that suits them and that they're comfortable with.
Mhm.
Some people love social media and they're on it all the time. Great. Other people can't stand it. So
Right.
then don't do it. Do
Yes.
something else.
Yeah.
And on our writingblueprints.com site, I'm talking to our listeners here, we have a lot of different tools on different marketing strategies that you can check out depending on sort of who you are and what your personality is. But I think it's important for people to understand that there's no one size fits all with marketing. You have to kind of figure
Absolutely.
out what speaks to you and then you'll enjoy it because it's really just communicating with your audience. And um, once you kind of figure out the way that's most fun for you to communicate, then you're going to want to do it. You're going to
Well,
want
if
to do
you're
it.
really authentic with,
Exactly.
if it has to be authentic, and then and that will make you successful if you're, kind of like you said,
Mhm.
using what is comfortable to you and in your style. And what
Absolutely.
makes sense for your book too. What
Yes.
is it a book about grief? Then, death, loss, grief, then you're going to be marketing differently than if it's a book about like pet rescue or something. So
Sure.
it depends on your book as well.
Mhm. Mhm. Okay, well, I'm going to open up some questions here, and if any of you have questions, please put them in the Q&A, not in the chat box. That way I can keep track of them. But I'm going to start with one, and I knew we'd get this question, so we'll just start off the bat here. Can you give us an idea of how much it costs to self-publish? I know it's dependent on many variables, but can you give us an example and a ballpark figure? So let's just say a picture book. That's probably the most expensive, I imagine, with the illustrations. Um, and can you give us a ballpark idea of what this costs?
Yeah, it depends. I think if you're doing everything on your own, and printing at an online printer, you can do it fairly inexpensively. Um, if you want a book that looks like any book you're going to pull off the shelf at Barnes and Noble or your local bookshop, there's an investment. You have to be willing to put in the money. Illustrators, you're going to pay anywhere from, 3 to 5 to 10,000 for an illustrator. Printing is $3, $4, $5 per book for a picture book. So times that by 1,000,
Uh-huh.
obviously plus freight. Design, editorial, print management, production, project management, probably in the range of 5, 6,000 or so. So it's a high cost investment, but we personally don't take on a book that we don't believe can be sold and the author earning back their investment within a year,
Mhm.
basically. Because once you earn back the investment, then it's sort of gravy after that.
Sure.
So there is a cost, but it's a cost you're paying for professionalism. You're paying for people's time,
Mhm.
for their labor and their experience and
Mhm.
their presence. You're paying for them to be 100% there for you and help you and
Mhm.
create the most beautiful book. And everyone who works in children's books, they're here because they love it. No one's getting rich off of this. Maybe J.K. Rowling, but most people are not getting rich off this business. So we're all here because we love it,
Yes.
and we all have the same goal. So
Mhm.
yeah,
Mhm. Well, and I think it's money well spent to hire someone who knows what they're doing because you can spend all that money and do it wrong and
absolutely.
have no chance of making it back.
Mhm.
So it is definitely worth having the guidance of
Mhm.
industry professionals to do it right the first time. I fully believe in that. Um, Jean asks, librarians rely on reviews in choosing books. How do you get independently published books reviewed in School Library Journal or Publishers Weekly, etc.? Now, I know that that is not part of what you do, But do you have any knowledge about how an independently published author would do that?
It's hard. So now Publishers Weekly, I think I think it's called Book Life. And SLJ may have this too, but at some point the publishing industry realized that independent publishing wasn't going away. And so they had to make room for independent publishers, independent authors.
Mhm.
So many of them have a publication that's sort of secondary to their primary, where you can submit your books for review, keeping in mind that a lot of those are paid review. And so that's what you can be doing, is paying to have those publications review your book. They give very honest reviews. You're not paying for a good review, you're just paying for the space.
Mhm.
But there are some awards you can't submit to unless you have a review from
Mhm.
one of those major sources. So it I wouldn't advise, necessarily throwing a lot of money at that unless there's a specific reason. You're trying to get on this reading list, like Texas Library reading list or something, where you have to have um, a review from a major source.
Mhm.
Um, so what you have to do is look at those sources and see if they have an outlet for independent and self-published authors for review.
Right. Kirkus does that as well. You can pay for a review as an independent author. And again, it doesn't mean they're going to give you a good review. They're giving you an honest review.
Kirkus doesn't give anyone a good review for any reason unless they really mean it. They're so
Unless
tough.
you really mean it.
Yeah,
I actually know a self-published author who got a good review from Kirkus, and
that's extraordinary.
and so it was great because he could put it on his Amazon page. He could put it on the back of his book. He could, he felt it was worth it. But yeah, you're right. There should be a strategic reason for this.
Mhm.
You don't want to just throw money out
Same
there.
with awards. Don't just throw money at every award. Don't.
Right.
Focus on two or three notable awards or ones that are important to you. Maybe it's in your state, or maybe it's just a notable award. Because it costs money to submit for awards. Even traditional publishers, you have to pay to submit for the Caldecott. They all cost because you're paying for people's time.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. And you usually have to send 5 copies of your book to the awards committee
More
or
than, yeah, Caldecott, I
yeah.
think it's like 20 or something like that. It's a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Dory asks, what if we have illustrations? So what if someone comes to you, they've either created the illustrations themselves or they have someone they've already paired up with? Would you advise them if you feel the illustrations are not of the high enough quality to compete on the shelf with traditionally published books? Would you advise them to find other illustrations?
I would, and I do, and I have.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's not always an easy conversation, but sometimes it will come down to, I would love to work with you. I like your story. We can do great things with it. I'm not comfortable moving ahead with this particular illustrator.
Hmm.
So that happens sometimes. It does.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's hard, but it's the illustrations are so important as we talked about. And I think also the cover design, if you are selling anything online, this big of a picture of your book cover is what people see, and then they decide if they're going to read more. The
Right.
title and the book jacket, and it's that big. So if you don't have a great book design, cover design that's eye-catching, that really grabs you, and I think title as well is so important, people are just going to keep going. They're going to scroll right past your book. So I don't think everybody always thinks through all of those considerations when they're self-publishing.
Right.
But the way we buy books now is very different from the way we bought them, 20 years ago, for sure.
That's true. If you're online buying books, you can't, unless it has look inside, but it's not the same as being able to hold a book and feel the paper and flip it
Yeah.
over. And it's a different, because picture books are such a sensory experience. So it is
Mhm.
really different. And so you do have to think about that. Your cover,
Right.
you have a split second to grab someone's eye.
Hmm. Hmm. You really do. So we've had a couple people ask about print on demand versus offset printing. first of all, define both of those for people who don't know, and then sort of talk about the pros and cons of each one.
Yeah, so offset printing is the traditional way that books were printed, and they're printed on these giant sheets, and they run through these huge printers where four colors and then black are mixed together and laid down on the pages. And then those giant pages get folded and gathered, trimmed and glued into the case. And there's a press operator who will run a few hundred sheets, look at the printing, see if the colors look correct, and then they'll make little tiny adjustments, more magenta, less yellow, that kind of thing. And it's sort of an art form, really. And it's really interesting to go to a printer and watch that process. When you do sheet fed offset printing, though, you have to really print about a minimum of 1,000 copies. Some printers will do about 500, but the best quality comes when you let the machine run for 1,000 or so.
Mm-hmm.
So you have to be able to commit to 1,000 books, 1,500 books or more. And so then print on demand is where the printing is done digitally. And that's what, if you work with an Amazon print on demand or Barnes and Noble print on demand, Lulu or CreateSpace, those kinds of things. When a book is ordered, purchased like through Amazon or something, then the book would be printed just a one-off from the digital machine. And so you're getting like a computer printing those pages.
Mm-hmm.
And it's getting better. Print on demand is getting better. I would say Ingram probably does the best job with print on demand.
Mm-hmm.
But it isn't the same. The quality isn't the same. The casing is not the same, because when you print on a traditional printer, the book is printed, those pages set and dry, then they go to the bindery, and then they're bound, into the case. In a print on demand, it's kind of all done right there, and it's a fine option. It's a great option for a lot of people who just, I only want to print 200 books. I only want to, print 500 books. Or I just can't handle the stock. I can't have 1,000 books, in my home, or I don't want to pay a fulfillment house, to warehouse 1,000 books for me. So it's a fine option, for a lot of people, and particularly for text-driven books. So memoir, fiction, things that don't have color art in it. Print on demand is a fine option.
Mm-hmm.
So those are kind of the differences. Print on demand is when the book is ordered, then it's printed.
Right.
The unit cost on that, even for the author, is going to be $8, $9, $10, $11, $12. Whereas the unit cost on offset printing, the more you print, the lower the unit cost goes down. So it could be anywhere from, $2, $3, $4, or $5.
Right.
Yeah.
So less profit on print on demand, but you don't have to lay out that much cash at the beginning.
Exactly.
For inventory.
It's a margins game, I guess. Yeah.
Right. Okay, thank you for that. Someone asked, can you talk about royalties? Now, I assume, well, tell us how you work as far as how you get paid for the books that you work on.
Right. So we are a production house.
Mm-hmm.
We provide the service. You pay for the service. We produce the book for you, and then it's your book. We don't retain any rights to it. We don't own it. We even buy the ISBN and barcode in the name of the author or their publisher. So there are no royalties for us because we're not a publisher, we're a production house. Mm-hmm. And so we're paid up front, and then all of the sales that the author does, that is their profit. So if that's a question about how we work, if someone has a question about royalties, I can answer that for traditional houses too. But
why don't you go ahead and do that if we have some people on here who are brand new to the process?
So royalties happen when it's when a traditional house buys a book from an author, meaning that they sign the book and they pay in advance against royalties. So an author the house would say, we're going to give you this $3,000 advance that will have to be earned out by royalty. So you're going to get 5% royalty on your book, 5% of the cover price. So your book is $15.95. You're going to earn 5% on for every book that is sold. And then twice a year, the author will receive their royalty checks, their royalty statement, which will either show the deficit you still owe, 2,500 towards your advance until you hit your advance in royalties. Once you hit your advance, then you would start receiving royalties, and most publishers do that twice a year. And most publishers, it's generally an even split between author and illustrator. Some do the royalties on net, some do it on cover price on the list.
I think more and more are moving to net, which means the money the publisher actually receives for the book from the bookstore, not the cover price. For those of you who want to know the difference, so it takes you much longer to earn out your advance. Basically, you're receiving 5% of 60% of the cover price, not the whole cover price. So it just takes a long time. But you can see with the production costs, just hearing what Aimee said about if you self-publish, what the production costs are. For a large publisher, it's even more because they have much more overhead than you would have. They're printing much a bigger print run. They might hire a really famous illustrator to give your book name recognition, but that illustrator is going to cost more. So you can see why the royalty is so small. So you don't have to lay out the cash, but it's going to take a lot longer for you to earn back a decent amount of money. Whereas if you really hustle with the marketing, you have a shot with your own book to see that profit probably a lot faster. So it's there's pros and cons to each.
Pros and cons. Yep.
Yep. Let's see how we're doing on time here. We got about 10 minutes yet. So what about illustrating with photographs for like a nonfiction picture book? Have you ever done anything like that?
We have produced some books like that. It's if that's for a lot of nonfictions, for a lot of nonfiction books. So let's say you're doing a book about birds of prey or something, and it's a science-based book, and you want to show real photographs. And even in that case, though, there often will be like editorial illustrations that will go along with that. So I think for kids, it's a nice mix, even if you have a book that's mostly photographic, to have some like editorial illustrations in there as well. We did like a science, technology, engineering, and mathematics focused book, and that had a lot of photographs in it. And so yeah, that's a lot of kids love nonfiction. My son loved to read nonfiction when he was young, and so we had just as many nonfiction books with photos as we did illustrated picture books.
We did too. Now, if someone comes to you with photographs, they have to have the permission to use them if they're not their photos, correct? Are there often fees involved in securing those permissions?
There always will be. So they would have to get the rights and have the rights agreement with whoever owns the photos, and then pay a usage fee for them.
Usage fee. So that's something that is up to the author to handle, basically before they bring you the photos and say, we want to use these in the book.
Yes, but we can be involved in sort of advising on that process. So the STEM book we did was actually with actually a military branch. And so the photos were all from the Department of Defense. And so they really had to get, special permission on those and pay the usage fees on those. But what was great was that we got to look at the light boxes of the photos and help choose, okay, these would be great photos to illustrate, how you make, an airplane kind of a thing. So you don't have to come just with, here's all the photos. You can say, here are some photos, and then we can look at a lot of photos with them and help kind of narrow that down. It's not unlike doing the illustration process, where you actually are still involved in kind of directing that artistic piece of it.
Okay, great. And probably a good idea to do that and then go and secure permission for the photos you're actually going to use.
That's the key right there. You don't want to just blanket permission, get for the,
Right.
because a lot of photos, the quality just isn't going to reproduce well.
Mhm.
So we would want to make sure that the quality of the photo has the resolution that will reprint well, that will look really nice in the book.
Mhm.
So it may be the greatest photo to illustrate your point, but if it's just a terrible photo and it's not going to reproduce well, then we would encourage you to find something different, a
Mhm.
better photo with a higher resolution.
Mhm. Great. Okay. Um, let's see. I'm trying to find the couple last questions here. Is it feasible to choose and pay an illustrator directly rather than working with one of your illustrators? Do you pretty much, if an author comes to you, want to be involved in choosing the illustrator and paying the illustrator? I mean, as opposed to an author saying, "Okay, I've got this illustrator. I've already contracted. I have an agreement with them." Um, would that ever work for you?
It
If you
happens
thought the illustrator
sometimes.
was
Again, we would have to vet the illustrator and just make
sure.
sure that they, are professionally up to par. Um, Generally, it's advisable for the author and illustrator to not have contact during the production of a book. And
Mhm.
this is the way that we've always worked, and it's the way that they work in traditional publishing. So there are times when an author will come with an illustrator and we explain this. And so during the process of the book production, they don't have conversations about the book. It all comes through the editor and the art director. Because we have one author who her daughter is an illustrator and she's illustrated some of her books. And, they've agreed they're not going to talk about the book
Mm.
without involving us. And that's so that it just keeps everything clean and
Right.
everyone knows what's going on. So if you have an illustrator that you love and have already contacted, certainly you can say, this is an illustrator I'd like to work with. And we found some of our best illustrators that way, actually. Um, but one of the services we provide is finding illustrators, contracting illustrators, so that you don't have to do all of that, that part of it.
Sure.
And so it's a service that we do offer.
Mhm.
And it actually, you tend to get a better result if the author and illustrator um, aren't con, you know aren't conversing with each other during the process.
Mhm.
So
Absolutely. Um, so who would retain the copyright on the illustrations? Would that be the illustrator who, however that illustrator comes to the book?
it really varies. A lot of the repped illustrators, many of them live in other countries, and we have amazing illustrators from all over the world. And so oftentimes Bookbridge will retain the art copyright as a way to kind of protect the illustrator. And and the text copyright obviously is the author's. A lot of illustrators who generally aren't repped, who have a little bit more experience, will ask to retain their own copyright, and
Mhm.
that's fine. So they can retain their copyright. If the author wants the art copyright, that is something that we also can grant. Usually, the illustrator might ask to be paid a little bit more upfront
Mhm.
because it's considered, kind of a copyright and a rights usage.
Right.
Otherwise, if the illustrator owns a copyright or if Bookbridge is holding it, and then there's an opportunity for merchandising or third party licensing or something, the author then would go back and, kind of negotiate rights with that illustrator, or
Mhm.
Bookbridge can, sort of navigate that for them. So it depends on the illustrator and it depends on like what the author's needs are as well.
Great. Great. I've had several people ask if you ever critique or edit manuscripts, and then if people don't necessarily want to self-publish, then they can go submit them traditionally or whatever. Or are you only working with people who are interested in using your services to self-publish or to tradition?
No, I do freelance editing on the side all the
Okay.
time. And My fiction editor is really good at this too, and he works specifically also with authors on getting their books in shape and ready to submit, and he helps advise on cover letter and give information about submitting to traditional publishers, because he comes from traditional publishing too. And it's also something, for picture book that I can provide as well, a service I can provide. Because really, I honestly have no ego about if do your work with me, if you do it with a traditional publisher or someone else. Um, you know, I'd like to see authors be successful in whatever way is
Mm-hmm.
working for them. And because I have so much experience in the industry, being on the other side of it, being on the acquisition side of it, it is something that I can offer, you know.
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
yeah.
That's awesome. That's great to know. I'm going to put up the slide again with your website on it. So is this bookbridgepress.com? Would they contact you there as well if they wanted just a freelance editing on their manuscript?
Yeah, so they on that website there is a contact page,
Okay.
or they can, just directly info@bookbridgepress.com is our email, and I get all of those emails. So yeah, just any query, you want to know if this is something you want someone to just do a manuscript evaluation or help get your manuscript in shape to submit. And this is something I do for authors that I'm new to and current authors I work with, who
Mhm.
want to also submit to a traditional house. So yeah, they can contact me, and I can take a look and offer those services if it fits in our schedule. Because my primary is working with authors to produce their books. But yeah, I do little side things like that all the time.
Terrific.
Mhm.
Terrific. Okay, well, Aimee, thank you so much. This was really, really informative, and I think we all learned a tremendous amount. I appreciate you being here tonight and sharing all of your expertise with us. I really do.
Thank you. I see Mike Shoulders just popped in. He's one of my authors, so saying hi. And Mike is someone I've worked with at traditional houses, and I've worked with him here. So, and a lot of my authors, I've worked with them at other houses and through Bookbridge. So,
Hmm.
anyway,
Well, great. Thank you so
thanks
much.
everyone.
Yeah. And we are taking next week off of the social. We will send out an email to that effect because Thursday is when we are launching our Writer's Secret Sauce. So I hope you all join us for that. But otherwise, we will see you back here in 2 weeks. All right.
Bye
Bye,
everyone. Thank
everybody.
you.
Thanks.